Hi, Poppy.
Hi, Mel. How are you?
I'm great. Lay it on me, Poppy.
Okay, I have a question for you. So like, how does one turn off that voice that's, been programmed into our head, um, telling us that, our needs or emotions don't matter and we must cater to theirs? So like, how do you turn that off?
Okay, it's an excellent question. And you don't turn it off, you have to lay a new soundtrack. So
Okay,
if you think about the default mindset, almost like a playlist that runs in the background, that it's almost hard to make it go silent. It's much easier to put a new playlist in there.
right.
And so there are two tricks I'm going to give you. So,
Okay.
number one, well, before I get into the tricks, I just want to acknowledge something. Great job recognizing that the default thinking doesn't serve you in your life now. So, the fact that you recognize, wow, I have this way of thinking that I don't want in my life, and I'm going to do something about it. So, that's enormous and it's amazing. Can you tell me, what does this default soundtrack sound like? What does it say to you?
So it says that, whenever I put myself first and don't put, other people first, I'm selfish, or if I want to do something for myself, it's never going to succeed.
Now,
But yeah,
did somebody tell you that?
yes, my parents,
Okay.
actually.
All right. So, thank you for like admitting that. And the reason why your parents told you that is because their parents probably told them that. And so they probably thought that they were protecting you. And instead, they sentenced you to a brain and a way of thinking that makes you feel terrible.
Right,
And so when you can recognize who the programming comes from, it also helps because then you can separate yourself from that voice because it's not your voice, it's your parents' voice. And you have a chance to break this chain. You have the chance to be the one that this playlist dies with. You
right,
have the chance to create a whole new way of thinking and talking to yourself. And that's incredible. And so the first thing that you said is that you have a belief because somebody programmed this into your mind that runs on default that putting yourself first is selfish. Correct?
right.
How does that impact your life?
Um, I get burnout, basically. Mhm.
If you could program a different belief, what would the belief be?
That, um, worth it, basically. It's okay for me to take care of myself. It's okay for me to have emotions. It's okay for me to just be me. Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Your whole life's about to change because not
Thank you.
only is it okay, I deserve to feel how I feel.
Right.
Like the main mantra I want you to have is I deserve to be happy. Does this make me happy? I deserve to feel happy. Does this make me happy? What would change in your life if you started to tell yourself over and over every single morning when you start your day, I deserve to be happy today? What would change if you believed that happiness was something you deserved?
Wow. I think that my day to day would be a lot better, basically. I would actually, get to cross off all the lists that I put down on my to-do list. I would have self-confidence. I would be able to go out and have a great day with friends. I noticed that I hold myself back a lot because of what's been programmed in my head. And I'm done with that, you know?
Well, I'm glad you recognize it. That's a huge step. Most of us sleepwalk through life and don't even realize that we have been trained as little kids to make everybody around us happy, and that it's your job to make people happy. It's your job to keep people satisfied. It's your job to make sure nobody's disappointed with you. And part of the problem is that underneath what your story is, which is it's selfish to put myself first, you have an uglier story. And the uglier story, which I recognize because I had this one too, is people will be mad at me if I put myself first. There will be consequences if I do what's good for me. And so that's what you're really wrestling with, is that you've connected taking care of yourself with somebody pulling their love away.
Yes.
And that's why you're scared to put yourself first. This goes way deeper. And so you're doing fantastic on behalf of all of us by recognizing that your own thinking is holding yourself back. And I can tell you're just sick of it. And so here's what you have to start to do. Number one, I want you to name the voice.
Name it?
Yeah, give it a name. Sally, Sue, Jocko, Raul, Michael. We got to name this thing.
Oh boy. Vicky, I guess.
Vicky. Okay. So when this default programming comes up, you're going to talk back to Vicky. Okay?
Okay.
And literally, you can even physically, when you feel yourself holding yourself back, that's the signal that this is default programming. You're going to turn toward Vicky. Literally, I want you to turn your body, and you're going to look as if Vicky's there, and you're going to be like, shut up, Vicky.
Right.
Now I want to hear you do it.
Shut up, Vicky.
Yeah, but if you don't make your boss happy, nobody's going to love you. Tell her, shut up.
Shut up.
If you don't do exactly what your parents want, they're going to be disappointed.
Shut up.
Say it louder. I don't believe you.
Shut up.
Say her name.
Shut up, Vicky.
You don't want to believe this shit Vicky's saying, right?
Nope.
What do you want to believe?
In myself.
Yeah. Your parents want you to be happy. They don't know how to make you happy. So they're just telling you what their parents told them. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is what people do. You are now an adult. You're not to blame for the crap, the malarkey, the garbage, the gunk, the generational trauma shit that your parents put in your brain. You're responsible, now that you're an adult, for reprogramming this. And so whenever your mind tells you something that you don't want to think, shut up, Vicky. I don't believe that. I believe that if I'm happy, my parents are going to think they won the lottery. I don't believe that. I believe that if I put myself first, I'm going to do better work. Shut up, Vicky. What the hell? You're not paying my rent. Shut up, Vicky. You're not going to the party. I'm not taking you with you. There's no +1 on this invitation. Shut up, Vicky. By distancing yourself and talking back to it, it loses its power over you. And what also starts to happen is the filter in your brain, the RAS, it's now noticing, oh, you actually care about empowering yourself. And you're going to see more and more reasons to put yourself first. But it really does start with, you got to delete that song, Shut Up, Vicky, Shut Up, Vicky, Shut Up, Vicky, on the playlist in your mind from the past. And you've got to insert the new programming you want to run on default, which is, I deserve to be happy. My parents are proud of me for being me. Nobody's disappointed in me. And if they are, I'm an adult. I can freaking handle it. And I got to start taking care of myself because I deserve that. Those are your beliefs, period. And whenever you start to feel like, here you go, holding yourself back, shut up, Vicky. And you'll notice the more you do this and you take ownership for programming your mind, the less Vicky's going to show up.
Okay.
I mean it.
Right.
I really mean it. If you believed in yourself, what's one change you would make that would improve your life?
I would be less intense, I would say.
Why are you intense?
Because, um, well, just a little story for you. Like, I'm an immigrant, and so are my parents. And they are very tough on me. They're very toxic because of, culture. And they feel the need to raise me a certain way. But in terms of, living in America, what they're doing to me is very toxic and abusive. So I'm just like always living on the edge, basically.
Yeah.
And if I could just, embrace myself, I think I would be a more relaxed person.
Yes. So are you open to some coaching?
Yes.
So a couple things I want to say about this. I agree with you. And when you take on the job of programming your mind to work for you, you will be happier. You will relax. And the reason why you're intense is because you have been trained to believe that at any moment something could go wrong.
Right.
And that's your lived experience. That is real. That happened. And that is what happened during your childhood. And it will also help you if you can lose the word toxic. Like, unless your parents are abusing you, and I don't know that they are or they're not, but if you lose the word toxic and you amplify a little compassion and you say, I'm not saying what my parents are doing is right. I'm not saying that they didn't cause issues for me emotionally and mentally and psychologically, but they did the best that they could. And I bet it was kind of hard to immigrate here. And I bet it was hard to feel like an outsider. And I bet the stakes felt really high for them. And they felt like outsiders. And they felt like they couldn't mess up. And I bet they took all of that stress that was their lived experience, and out of fear and love, they aimed it at you.
Right.
And the reason why I want you to drop the word toxic is because I see this word thrown all over the internet. And it's a very divisive word, particularly if you want to improve your relationship with the people who are engaged in behavior that feels toxic. And so I think your parents probably did the best they could with their experiences in life and with the situation that they were in. And that if they truly understood what it was like for you as a child, they'd be mortified and horrified and they'd feel terrible. Is that a fair assessment?
I guess for some parts.
Okay. So I don't want to have you have to go in through your whole family history, but if there's, abuse and that kind of stuff, then yeah, that is toxic. And you do need boundaries, and you'll figure that out with your therapist. But when it comes to not adding more pressure on yourself, adding a little compassion so that it doesn't feel so personal, and accepting the fact that this was a form of like emotional abuse for you, that you stressed you the hell out. You have this toxic stress in your body. You feel on edge all the time. You can change this. And you can also change this and change the dynamic with your parents. And the way that you change the dynamics with your parents is by taking responsibility for how you show up for yourself. There's always kind of two people in a relationship. When you change, the energy that you bring into that relationship is going to change. And they're going to have no choice but to change in reaction to it. That's how this creates a major ripple effect, because it has held you hostage for far too long. And you have the chance to not only heal yourself, but to heal this pattern that's been passed down through your family.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Um, so for right now, we're not really on speaking terms. Yes, they
Okay.
have abused me physically, emotionally, mentally. It's bad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, since you're not on speaking terms and you're seeking therapeutic help, let's first say this. I am proud of you for getting the help that you need. And I'm
Thank
proud
you.
of you for drawing boundaries that put you first. And drawing boundaries that put you first is an example of you believing that you're worthy and that you deserve to be happy. And that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And when you continue to start to evict the bully that's in your head by naming that bully and talking back to that bully, you will start to hear and reclaim the most powerful voice on the planet, your own. Period. And you don't need to worry about your parents. The time will come, if it ever comes, when you will feel strong enough, confident enough, secure enough, and safe enough to reconnect with them if that's what you choose to do. And if you choose to never do that, that's okay too,
Right.
because you deserve to be happy. You do.
Okay.
What did you get from this conversation?
Whew. Basically, to have more compassion for others as well as myself.
Yes, because part of learning to accept yourself is being compassionate. Compassion for self is super important. You don't have to excuse what somebody did. But when you seek to kind of understand what was going on, both for yourself, for other people, when you bring compassion to it, that's where you open the door to true power for yourself and where you take control and responsibility for what happens in your life moving forward. You get to decide what happens next. And when you start to change the way that you speak to yourself, again, your whole mindset's going to change. And that will be what empowers you to create a new relationship if that's what you decide to do in the future. But what you're doing right now is you're actually working on the most important relationship on the planet, and that's the one you have with yourself. Let's just start at the most basic level. And can you define for all of us what is estrangement?
I mean, people define it in different ways. That's part of the problem with the research that's been done. The way that I think of it is it's a cutoff in a relationship that may be temporary, may be permanent, but where it's not just people getting out of touch. It's where one person, because typically it's one person wants it and one person doesn't. More typically, it's initiated by the adult child, because that's my area of specialization is with parent-adult child estrangement. Um, and the parent doesn't want it, the adult child does. So I think of it as either a complete cutoff or a near to complete cutoff.
How common is estrangement?
Well, apparently it's very common and getting more common all the time. A recent study out of Ohio State said that 26% of fathers are estranged from their kids. The same studies found 6% of mothers are, but other studies have found that closer to 10 to 11% of mothers are estranged from their kids. But if you expand it out away from just the parent, adult, child to family members in general, then something like 27% of families in the U.S. are estranged from a family member. So it's incredibly common. I think growing more common all the time.
Why do you think it's growing more common?
I think it's a variety of reasons. I think our culture is becoming more identity focused, more tribalistic, where we have kind of in-group, out-group ideas, and that no longer includes family. I think the notion of family has radically changed. Where, say, prior to the 1960s or so, there was the idea of honor thy mother and thy father, respect thy elders, families forever. And that's really been turned on its head, where increasingly the idea is that of chosen family, the family who you make it, that people don't owe their parents anything, that the most important thing is the preservation of my happiness, my well-being, my mental health. So there's always been estrangements, but never before have they been based on the idea that it's actually good for one's mental health, or it's even an act of existential courage to cut off a parent or a family member. And it's tied to what the sociologist Anthony Giddens talks about as the evolution from role to self. Whereas it used to be there were very clear ideas prior to the 20th century, arguably before that, but where kind of the ideas about what it takes to be a member of a family was fairly clearly defined: being a good parent, being a good child, etc., being a good adult child. And then it changed much more towards an orientation towards self. So what Giddens talks about is that we've had the evolution of what he calls the pure relationship, where relationships are now purely constituted on the basis of whether or not that relationship is aligned with that person's ideals, their goals, their aspirations for happiness, etc. And if they're not, then the relationship is viewed as being problematic and corruptive and not worth pursuing.
You see it all over social media. Like if you
Oh,
look at like all of the, like, just put a post up and you're like, oh, if they had cut them off, toxic behavior.
exactly
And
right.
what do you want us to know before we even jump into this topic of an intentional cutting off of a relationship with a family member or a friend? What do you want us to know about the reality of relationships, the dimensional reality? What is true about relationships that last and what relationships are meant to be about?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and there's probably no really easy answer to that. The way I think about it is both at the community level and at the individual level. I mean, at the community level, I feel like we as a culture are really suffering. We have high rates of mental illness, we have high rates of depression in particular, loneliness, social isolation, increasing atomization, increasing tribal view. So we're really kind of coming apart at the seams. It really feels like we're living at a time when our culture is falling apart. So at the community level, I think that family is an important part of that aspect, and that people should do whatever they can to prioritize family and family relationships. That said, I don't believe that people have to do it at any cost. There are family members who are very destructive, who are very hurtful, who aren't willing to make amends, to take responsibility. I mean, most of the people that I work with are the parents, and my whole method is around that you have to take responsibility for the things that have caused your child to turn away from you. And if you don't feel like you understand, then you have to pursue empathy and understanding and compassion. But from the adult child's perspective, I would like to see more compassion for parents, that parents typically do the best that they could do, given what their own social, economic, temperamental resources were, their own childhood traumas, etc. And they deserve a certain period of time of being able to work on the relationship and to have a hearing and that kind of thing. So that's kind of the general way that I would think about that.
So, Dr. Coleman, I'm fascinated with how you got into the work of counseling and supporting parents who are estranged from adult children. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to do this?
Sure. I mean, I was married and divorced in my 20s and have a fully grown daughter who I'm very close to. But there was a period of time in her early 20s where she cut off contact for several years, in large response to my becoming remarried and having children in my second, and which is my current marriage of some 30 plus years. And there were many ways that she felt displaced by that, hurt by not so much the divorce because she was so young, but just by all the kind of things that can happen with divorce and remarriage and being a blended family and the like. And at the time, there was nothing really written to advise me or help me. I was in therapy at the time trying to get help, and the advice I got was terrible, as it often is.
What was the advice that you were getting that
The
was
advice
terrible?
was just kind of like, you need to remind her of all the things that you've done for her and correct her memories and just show up at her place and kind of, demand that she see you. And all those things are, they just, none of them really cause her to feel understood or cared about, or like I had any degree of compassion for what her experience it was. So it really wasn't until I just learned how to stop explaining, stop defending, stop blaming, and respect where she was coming from that things began to turn. But during that time of estrangement, it was easily the most painful, awful, disorienting thing I've ever been through or ever hope to go through again. The idea that, I don't know if you have children, Amy, but the idea that your child would cut you off and you would may never see them again is horrifying, painful, and terrifying as well. So once we did have a reconciliation, I thought, well, there's so many people struggling with this. I wrote my first book on the topic in 2007, When Parents Hurt, and as a result of that, I got a wide following of parents here and in other countries who are dealing with this. On the basis of that, I developed a system of webinars that I still do, a free Q&A every other Monday. And as a result of that, I did a research study of 1,600 estranged parents that's been published in numerous academic journals, and wrote my most recent book, Rules of Estrangement, Why Adult Children Cut Ties and How to Heal the Conflict. As a result, I'm also now have developed a training program for therapists because there's a huge need, which hopefully will be live in the next week or two. People can visit my website if they were interested in training or learning more about that.
So let's talk about that moment of estrangement. What typically drives, and I'll focus on adult children since that's your area of expertise, but I'm sure that all these themes apply to friendships where there's estrangement, all kinds of relationships where there's estrangement.
I agree.
What are the factors that typically lead someone to say, that's it, I'm going to cut my parents or somebody else out of my life?
Yeah. There's a number of pathways. If you look at the surveys of adult children, what they typically will say is emotional abuse, physical abuse, neglect, differences in values. Those are the most common things reported by the adult child. But other pathways are divorce, in my own, obviously my own personal experience, but also statistically, in my own research study and in my own clinical practice, 70% of the parents have been through a divorce. So there's a number of ways that divorce can increase the risk. One is it may cause the child to blame, of any age, to blame one parent over the other for the divorce. It can bring in new members, step siblings, half siblings, new stepmothers, stepfathers have to compete for emotional and material resources. It may cause the child to support one parent over the other, even if the parents don't need to have that kind of support. Finally, in a highly individualistic culture like ours, it could cause the child to see the parents more as kind of individuals with their own strengths and weaknesses, and not as a family unit that they're a part of. So divorce is a clear risk. Mental illness in the parent, but equally mental illness in the child, in the adult child. The role of therapy, bad therapists or therapists that just aren't very well educated in this, who assume that every problem that surfaces in adulthood has a childhood trauma at the heart of it, which isn't necessarily true, but so many therapists believe that and put the adult child on the pathway to estrangement.
Hold on a second. I just want to make sure everybody hears that. So you're saying that there are lots of therapists out there that take whatever their client is telling them and run with it, and basically facilitate the linking of childhood issues with estrangement being something that they should consider?
Yeah, consider or do. I mean, I've had numerous parents show me letters from adult children where they said, well, my therapist said that you're a narcissist and you can't change, so I'm not willing to do family therapy with you. And these are often therapists who've never met the parent. They're diagnosing the parent from afar. And more problematic, they're assuming childhood traumas that may or may not exist. I mean, childhood traumas are a real thing. But in this day and age, there's the assumption that if somebody has a problem in adulthood, well, you just have to figure out where the childhood trauma lies, and then the doors to identity and happiness and meaning will be open. But that's really problematic. I mean, we're really preoccupied with traumas at this point in our culture and society in a way that's really causing a lot of harm.
So I'm sure that as people are listening, there's a bazillion bells going off. And so I, of course, want to go, okay, well, let's talk about childhood trauma and all this stuff. But I want to stay in this topic because I personally believe that everybody listening has had either an experience with estrangement or they know somebody who is really struggling because of estrangement. And I can think even in my own family that when my uncle died, he had never met two of his grandchildren.
Wow.
And just how helpless I felt about trying to, like, wishing somehow that could have been repaired before he died, and knowing the heartache and the frustration and the anger and the sadness and the grief that happens when somebody makes a decision to cut you out of their life and you don't even really know why.
Right.
And so is that, like, for a baseline, how do you know if this is a situation of estrangement versus just busyness? And I don't really like that brother of mine, so I don't really call him very often, but he does get the Christmas card from us. Like, what actually, how do you know you're in the boundaries of somebody has deliberately cut you out?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. It's not, the answer isn't at all obvious. And I think that a lot of parents today end up getting more estranged because they're wanting more closeness from their adult child than the adult child feels capable or desiring of giving. And so often, and there was a survey done out of the University of Virginia that said that a majority of parents raising children want and expect to be best friends with their children once they're grown. And it's great work if you can get it, but a lot of adult children don't necessarily want that level of closeness or intimacy. And one of the problems with social media, which can be another pathway to estrangement, is that it allows a certain kind of intrusion of the parent on the adult child that they might not want. So I think a certain percentage of estrangements occur that wouldn't have occurred in the past because the adult child could just sort of organically become who they are, independently develop their own voice and autonomy without parental influence. Whereas now parents can reach their adult child, anywhere in the world within a matter of seconds. And so I think a certain percentage of adult children feel very crowded today. What's the most common complaint I hear in every single estranged adult child's letter is, you need to respect my boundaries, right? So boundaries have become the most important thing. And it's in part because parents raising children over the past 4 decades are more worried. They're more worried about getting their children through the narrow bottleneck that can land them in a successful life. They're worried about the world that their children are inhabiting. So parents have become more anxious, more guilt-ridden, more intrusive, more surveilling. And that doesn't always work in the parent-adult-child relationship in the long term. So to circle back to your question, it may not start out as an estrangement. It may start out more as kind of normal distance, but as soon as the parent starts to act too victimized or hurt or criticizing the adult child, then they're putting themselves on the path to a potential estrangement.
I can personally say there was a period in my relationship with my mom who I love deeply, and I know she loves me. And as I look through the family history, both on my mom and dad's side, they have, I guess, somewhat kind of complex arm's length relationships with their family. Love, but not hanging out all the time. And part of it is physical distance. And there was a period of time where I was newly married and I was so enthusiastic about my husband and about his family. And we were living closer to my husband and my husband's family. My parents are in the Midwest, they're on the East Coast, and I know it was an extraordinarily painful period for my mom because she, from a distance, felt like she was losing me to another family.
Yeah, it's very common.
And I started to sense that resentment or that fear, and that started to, upset me.
Yeah.
And so we got into a period of time where we didn't know how to come together.
Yeah.
How, she would say something, I would get offended. I would say something, she would get offended. And it felt like our relationship had all of these landmines that neither one of us wanted there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get back to that, like, I just love you and you just love me. And I could see that without me doing a tremendous amount of great therapy and without us even having almost like a period where we tolerated each other, that it could have led to a disastrous and hurtful situation for both of us, because we're both very opinionated. We have big emotions. We're very similar. And we didn't know how to navigate this without hurting or upsetting the other person. And so I think at least when I and I'm so grateful it didn't end up differently, because I feel closer to her now than I ever have. But I can see how it's almost like when people separate before divorce, I always kind of roll my eyes and I'm like, what's the point here?
Sure.
I can see how just going, I'm not going to call them. I'm not going to pick up the phone. I'm not going to go visit. I'm not going to do this. That sort of de-escalation can lead to something like this.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Is
I
that
agree.
what you've seen?
Yeah, you're saying that the de-escalation can actually help, that it can provide.
I think it can help on some hands, but I could see how not talking to somebody
Yeah.
for a month or 2 months or a couple months and just kind of being that sort of cold, uninterested, distant, I could see how that would actually throw gasoline on the fire, because the emotions actually build. And then every interaction is so high stakes. It's a recipe for disaster.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you're putting your finger on a couple of important things. When I was talking about the pathways to estrangement, I didn't list one of the most common pathways, and that's when the child marries. The adult child marries, and if there's conflict between the son-in-law or daughter-in-law and the parents, sometimes the son-in-law or daughter-in-law basically says to their spouse, choose me or them, you can't have both. And men in particular are vulnerable to that. But you're also putting your finger on the fact that the parents can commonly feel like, well, how can the other parents get to spend more time with you or the grandkids? And in some ways, sons are more at risk. The parents of sons are more at risk of that because of what sociologists refer to as the matrilineal advantage, which means statistically, daughters are more likely to kind of prioritize their own family over sons, et cetera. But that is a really common source of estrangement or beginning conflict. And to your point, that once conflict starts, it can quickly spiral out of control and lead to an estrangement. And for parents, I think most parents feel kind of panicky when the adult child starts to pull back and be more distant, become less available, and that causes what John Gottman refers to as the pursuer-distancer dynamic, where the
What is
person
it called?
He talks about it from a marital research perspective, the pursuer-distancer dynamic, and it's associated with a high risk of divorce, where one partner, more typically the wife, is pursuing the other for more contact, more intimacy, more communication, and the other person, more typically the husband, pulls back more, becomes more shut down, and over time that dynamic gets more rigidified and harder to change until the couple splits up. Well, a similar thing I observe with parents and adult children around estrangement, where the parent starts to pursue more and more and more. Why aren't you calling me? Blah, 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 and then they're off to the races.
Can I ask another question? Because I have heard a bazillion times, and I talk about it, I've studied it, about how the body keeps the score, the body remembers, you feel things before your thoughts can explain them. But the way that you just talked about memory, something clicked. And the fact that my lived experience is also that I don't remember. And I also have this hyper drive, Dr. Becky, to go, oh, it was great. Yeah, I don't remember anybody yelling at me. I don't remember anything like that at all. And yet, the thing that I hate about myself as a parent is that when I get frustrated, I vomit on my kids. I just snap. And their moments of high stress cause me to be like, "Rah!" right at them. And then I quickly apologize. I quickly am like, I'm sorry. It's not an excuse that I'm stressed out right now.
Yeah.
But is it normal to not remember what your parents did when you were like emotional?
100%. So it's normal to not remember in this one version of memory that we all kind of accept as the whole truth, right? So going back to our body. So a kid gets yelled at. They're 3. They get yelled at. Like we all know. Like, by the way, I yell at my kids too. And I'm going to yell at my kids later today. Like we all do it, right? I'm stressed. It's not them. We don't respond to our kids. We respond to the circuit in our own body that gets activated when we witness things in our kids.
Okay, everybody, I want you to hear that. You're not responding to your kids or your dog or your colleagues or your spouse. You're responding to something in your body that gets activated in that situation.
Exactly. So my kids, let's say with this dad, he's like, this kid is having a tantrum, right? And an example was like a classic 4-year-old tantrum. I cut the grilled cheese in half instead of leaving it whole, or I cut it in half as triangles instead of,
how dare you?
How dare you horrible parent, right? And by the way, for the kid, that's also a trigger moment for them. They obviously were filled up with frustration, and that was just the spillover point. But I see this thing in my kid. Then my body does this inside. What do I know about overwhelming, kind of extreme displays of emotion? And my body kind of scans its circuits. And if I've learned in my own past, oh, no, that is so dangerous. That would get you sent to your room, which is fear of abandonment. That would get you called a spoiled brat. That would get you those, and I know this from doing it as a parent, that would get you those dart eyes that just say everything we need to say as a parent.
Mine's a tone shift.
Right? They're like, you are a horrible person, right? Which kids are like, oh no, this is literally dangerous. Kids need us to survive. They need us to get food, shelter, and water. So they pick up on what feelings and parts of them are allowed and what feelings and parts of them are threatening, and they adjust accordingly. So if I had to learn in my childhood, oh yeah, those big displays of emotion, even if I don't remember with my, language, yeah, that would never have been allowed, then my body scans itself when I have a tantrum that I'm witnessing for my kid. And then here's actually I really think the most compassionate and game-changing part. It's not okay that I yell at my kid. Definitely not. And yet, my body is essentially saying, oh, I'm trying to help my kid. I'm like, no, shut that down. That is so dangerous. Now, I'm still living in 1975 when it was dangerous for me, right? But my body is actually trying to help the situation.
So let me see if I can understand that. So if you are an adult now and your child is upset that you did not cut the sandwich into 4s in triangles, which I completely understand. We were sort of the sticks with no crust at our house. How dare you do anything else? And your child starts to get overwhelmed and stressed. It then triggers this stored experience for you. So you are still in your 1976 body.
Yeah.
Are you now just repeating what you saw the adults do?
In a way. So I'm extremely inspired by internal family systems and Dick Schwartz's way of understanding the mind and our body. And what he really explains so well is when we have an experience as a kid, and many, not one, where we essentially learn this part of me, the part that gets overwhelmed and doesn't yet have the skills to manage those overwhelmed feelings, so they just explode out as a volcano. If that part is really what I would say is non-conducive with attachment. I don't get, it's not like I need my parent to say tantrum away, but I don't get presence. I don't get compassion. I just get yelled at. I need to develop, okay, and stay with me here, a different part of myself that shuts down that part. So I literally develop a different part that's like, Becky, you ungrateful kid, you are too much. Stop doing this. And that's actually called, in IFS language, a protector part. It sounds mean, but I think we all understand, its function early on is to protect me.
Yeah.
Because at least if I do that to myself and almost shame myself, at least then I don't get the wrath of my parent, or I don't get sent to my room, I don't get hit, or I don't get this awful punishment.
Right.
And so it's helping me adapt. And so it's helping me shut down
a part of you.
A part of me. Now fast forward to 2022. What a trigger really is, and by the way, not only with our kids, with a partner, with anyone at work, is I think we see a part of someone that we had to learn to shut down harshly in ourself. And then that protector part in us, it really does. It comes to like the CEO seat of the board table. It's like, I got this, guys. Like, I got this, right? And then our kid or our coworker, they kind of become like a pawn in our game. We act out on them what we had to learn to act on ourselves.
Right.
And the most empowering shift, okay, is we often, when things trigger us, we look to shut down someone else and kind of make them more like us. I would never have this explosive emotion, or I would never, with like a whine. Why is whining so triggering? To me, it just represents like helplessness. And I grew up in a pull up your bootstraps family, and I would never be a puddle
Big girl
of
panties is my family. Yeah.
Exactly. Then if you really want to work on your triggers, the question we have to ask ourselves is not, how can I make this person like me? But what am I seeing in someone else that I need to be inspired by, that I need to actually grow that part in myself?
So let's walk through some triggers.
Yes.
So you were talking about whining.
Yep.
Which is a
Perfect.
cry for help. So what is what is the exercise we go through for ourselves as adults to let these moments that are triggering us
Yep.
become a moment to repair things or rewire things, or what word would you use?
Great. Both of those, right? So, because the truth is, with our trigger moments, we often think, yeah, I have to repair with my kid. I don't like that I yelled at them. But what you're on to, Mel, which is so true, is first we have to repair with ourselves.
Yes.
We have to do both, right? So probably my most popular workshop I do, shockingly, is called my Triggers Workshop. So it's 75 minutes with like a whole step-by-step process, but I can get into some of it here. So the first step is in a calm moment, kind of asking ourselves a version of, what is my most generous interpretation of this trigger event in someone else? We always come up with the least generous interpretation with the trigger. My kid's pathetic. My kid's so helpless. My kid's so annoying with whining, right? It's easy to come up with.
What about
those.
anxiety? Because that's a big trigger for me. Like my son, not so much anymore, but one of our daughters in particular is little Mel. And there is intense coming at me. I am like 15 texts in a row when she's nervous about something. And then the second I answer the question, it's, well, you're not right. And then hang up.
Yep.
And that is deeply triggering.
To you.
Yes.
So is it the texts that are triggering? Is it the you're not helping me that's triggering? Which is the worst part? Or the whole arc?
The whole arc of it is so like, it's just like this, I feel like a punching bag almost.
Yeah. So I guess the question I would ask myself there is like, okay, so what's my most generous interpretation of what my daughter's doing, just so I can start to see my kid as a teammate, so we can be against this pattern together that doesn't work for either of us, instead of me looking at my child like they are the enemy and they are the problem. So I think, for example, you might say to soften
what just got me
Yeah.
there is the word enemy. Like, I feel like there was an experience as a kid that if I did something that upset my mom, I was the enemy.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's for so many of our trigger moments. Actually, we can be, when you ask yourself what's the most generous interpretation of someone's behavior, I think this is the big framework shift that I think is the most important in any relationship where there's conflict, is we go from sitting across from someone and looking at them like they're the problem to sitting on the same side as the table as someone and looking together at the problem. So I always think about that, or I try to. Like, am I looking at my kid like they're the problem? Or can I reframe what's happening so I feel like it's me and my kid against a problem? So can we be together against helpless whining versus am I looking at my kid like a helpless, annoying kid who's just bothering me? Can I look at my kid like, wow, something important is happening with anxiety and it's tricky to figure out. It's tricky for us to figure out something that's going to be helpful versus does my kid come and vomit her anxiety and then reject me and that's just annoying? I promise as long as we're in that second mindset, nothing's going to be useful just because like we don't like our kid when we think about them that way.
So true.
Right?
I love the reframe of bring them to your side of the table. What do you do if you're a kid that grew up with somebody who was wildly controlling. What you wore, how you dress, go hug your uncle, know you're doing sports.
What would I
You
say to
gotta-
that kid?
How do you, like if you're now the adult.
Who was that kid?
Yes, because what I want to focus on are kind of the top experiences that you experience as a child, right? So one would be overly sensitive, like I was, overly worried, overly needy, like I was just a super sensitive kid, okay? And when you're a super sensitive kid that feels separate and unsafe emotionally,
Yeah.
and you don't get those needs met, it develops into a certain type of adult. When you are a kid that is controlled by a parent, you develop into certain types of patterns as adult. When you have a parent that is emotionally abusive, either weeks of the silent treatment or struggling with their own mental illness, or they're not there for long periods of time, that develops certain coping mechanisms as a kid. And what I love about what you're saying is so many of us have experiences inside our emotional life of being separate.
Yes.
And what I would love to hear you help us with is, as you're starting to realize, as we listen to you and dig into your work, Dr. Becky, that this is very, very normal. And it's also a huge opportunity for you to take control of your adult life and your adult experience, which then completely changes how you parent and how you love another adult and how you show up at work. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, one of the biggest things that a lot of women write into me about in the work landscape is just feeling terrified about speaking up.
Yep.
And that's directly tied to you being shut down as a kid.
I mean, 100%. Now, this is my favorite topic to talk about, is especially for women, our relationship with desire. All tantrums are, and meltdowns are explosions of desire. That's what they are. You want something badly, and your parents, and something gets in the way of having it. I wanted my grilled cheese cut in a way. And what we so often do as a parent is we shut it down. We're like, you're being ridiculous. But what a kid learns is my desire is unsafe. My desire. And I actually think about this a lot with I have 2 boys and 1 daughter. I think about all of them, but I think about it a lot with my daughter. How can I help her learn regulation skills while preserving access to desire? And I think that, desire in terms of asking for a raise, desire in terms of sex, desire in terms of, am I allowed to want things for myself, right? That's what I think all of us adults are trying to reclaim.
Right.
Right? Am I allowed to want things even when it makes someone else upset is
Right.
another, right? And most of us, me too, early on learned to, quote, be a good girl, which just means I have learned that I had to, for my survival, to be adaptive, pay more attention to what others wanted of me than what I might want for myself. So what's the process of reclaiming that?
Can I ask one more question before
Yeah.
we go into reclaiming? Because this is a huge area.
Huge
because
topic.
we're now also stepping into people pleasing and stepping into perfectionism
All of it.
and stepping into overthinking
Yep.
and questioning yourself
Yep.
and the inability to take risks.
Hmm.
And this is particularly true for women.
Mm-hmm.
And this fear of being seen. And I see exactly what you're saying, that it is tied to a deep-seated belief that you don't deserve to be seen, or that the stuff that you want doesn't matter.
Well, because you learned early on that whenever you were most in contact with your want, with your desires, it endangered your relationships.
Can you give us just a couple examples that really bring it home for
Yeah.
people that are like, wait, what are you
So
talking?
here's a great example, because I also think we do this black and white thing. We're like, oh, so I just let my kid have the tantrum. We give ourselves buckets. So let's say you're in the toy store with your kid. I think this is a perfect example. And you're like, we're just going to the store to get a birthday present for your cousin. Okay?
Yes.
Something like that. And you're like, okay, this is going to go well. And then of course it doesn't go well. Your kid is a meltdown because they want the Lego set. And you don't want to get it for them. It wasn't your plan. So when we say to our kid, what is wrong with you? I told you we're here for your cousin. Can you ever focus on someone else? My kid doesn't learn anything except wanting things for myself is bad and wrong. Period. Now, the opposite isn't good either. Oh, okay. I mean, I guess we'll get you that Lego set, and that's okay. I mean, if you want to get the Lego set for your kid, obviously get the Lego set. But if your plan wasn't to get it and you didn't want to get it, actually, that's another tricky message for your kid. A kid learns my wants and needs are so overpowering to me, but wow, they just made my sturdy leader become not so sturdy and change their mind. That's actually also dangerous. Here's where that in between is. Oh, it's so hard to be in a toy store and see all these fun things and not get anything. Of course you want that Lego. It's normal to want things. It's actually awesome that you know what you want. You know you want this Lego. Here's the thing. I could take a picture of it. There will be a time, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or your birthday, that something's coming up. We're not going to get it today, sweetie. It's just not one of those days where we're going to buy you an extra thing. I know that's so hard. And so what my kid learns there is my parent sees the want under the meltdown. I didn't become a bad kid. I became a kid who's a good kid who wants something for myself. And that's just a hard thing to want something and not have it. I'm preserving access to my desire while I still have a very boundaried, sturdy leader.
How do you, as an adult, reclaim that access to desire and repair this?
I think I think for anything we're trying to shift, it's actually hugely helpful to our circuits, to our body, to just start with, like, the things that I struggle with today, they were all adaptations. That's why it's actually why I don't like diagnosis as a psychologist. It's why I don't love the word symptoms. I think it's like kind of this cruel thing we do to people that we're like, yeah, wow, you were really crafty as a kid and learned to adapt. And now we're going to smack a label that like is pretty mean on you. Like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
You know? And I do feel like there's something in our body that's like, hey, can you recognize like everything I did for you? You know, like, okay, maybe I don't work for you anymore, but like I need some credit, right? It's like anything else in life. Right? You have to say to an employee at your table, like, that's a great idea. We're going to hold that for next quarter, right? And if you only say to them, no, 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 they just get louder and louder. They want to be seen too. They don't necessarily...
they shut down.
Or they shut down and it comes out in another way.
Right.
So I think actually there's something to saying. There's not something. There's so much to saying. I have a phrase I always use for myself. Thank you for your years of service. Like I think, you know, when I'm struggling with something, so if someone's now like, yeah, I have this time and I'm trying to like do stuff for myself and figure out what I want, and all that happens is I have a panic attack. It's so hard to know what I want. Just to put your hand on your heart and even say to that feeling, like, this must have been adaptive early on to actually not know what I want. And it's frustrating for me now. And still, like, I appreciate the way that you helped keep me safe for probably 18 years. Like, that was really meaningful. And then I could continue. I'm going to try little experiments here and there. You're going to resist. You're going to tell me I'm being selfish. You're going to tell me this is stupid. You're going to tell me I'm not good at things. That's okay. That's your role. But now that I know that, like, I'm going to show you over time that we're safer now to try different things. Like, and if someone's listening being like, do you actually mean I should say that to myself? Like, I literally mean you should actually put your hand on your heart and say those words inside your head, or actually just say them out loud. And if you start tearing, that would be completely normal. Or if you're tearing now, completely normal. And I often think these tears we have, they're like tears of relief from, like an inner child in us that's been waiting to hear a certain message. Right? We have to honor the things that hold us back in the way that they used to help us before those things are willing to a little bit release themselves.
How do you start to figure this out? Do you start with the triggers, like wherever you feel that alarm or that sort of discomfort in your body?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, especially if you have a visceral reaction, right? Because often what we do after we have a trigger is we blame ourselves. I'm a horrible person. Or if it's, I messed up my kids forever. I'm an awful person. I'm a monster. So what we do is we actually repeat the pattern that got us there. We add aloneness and self-alienation and self-blame. And that's actually the experience of shame. Shame used to be an adaptive emotion when we were kids. Shame stops us in our tracks from being in a part of ourselves that would have been met with distance.
Yeah.
So it's trying to help us out. But shame really it's a freeze state. So every time now we add on shame and blame, we add a frozenness. And most people I know who want to change are like, yeah, change isn't conducive with freeze. It's conducive with movement. You have to. So it's interesting. People say, especially after you yell at your kids or something like, oh, but I feel like if I treat myself with compassion or something, I'm like letting myself off the hook. If you want to let yourself off the hook for change, shame and blame yourself, because that will make it impossible to change. Impossible.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying about the fact that when you pile on after you've been triggered and you make yourself wrong for having this stored, memorized, adaptive reaction, whether it's to withdraw or to yell or to blame or whatever, that when you said the piece about you're alone, I think this also contributes to why so many of us feel lonely and feel separate the older we get. That we have spent so long, and it sounds like almost from childhood, adapting to situations that we didn't quite understand, and then we continue to do it and continue to do it and continue to do it, and so you feel like just isolated, with yourself. But all we really want is love. Like, I know that your whole premise is we are all good inside. I believe the same is true. I always say, first of all, anybody is capable of changing. And second, just assume good intent. Before you frickin' pile on somebody, just assume good intent. Easier said than done.
And about yourself, assume good intent. Right?
That's probably the piece I missed.
That's hard. Like, I didn't want to yell at my kid. I didn't want to yell at my daughter. Like, nobody, I don't know any parent who's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to eviscerate my child. Like, no one wants to do that. And then it doesn't make it, quote, okay that you did it. But I always think we just ask the wrong questions. People are like, so it's okay? It's like, no, it's not okay or not okay. It happened. Now we just have a choice of if we want to be effective and change, period. It's not about evaluating it as okay or not okay. The thing already happened. Like, is it okay that a car crashed? No one would say that. You're like, well, the car crashed. Okay, now what? Right? And yeah, I think assuming positive intent about ourselves actually leaves us on the hook for change, because we can see we're a good person who did not a good thing. And then we actually have the energy to be curious, right? And I think that's where we change, when we're curious. Okay, so I yelled at my kid. Okay, something happened. My kid complained about the dinner I made. But I think a question we often have to ask ourselves about a trigger is not where did the pathway end in a trigger, but where did that pathway start, right? Like, do I have any time to myself? Where do I practice meeting my own needs? Do I need more help at dinner time? Right? That I can't wait till I get to the point until.
Well, let's just take this, because we're getting close to you needing to blaze to go teach everybody about mom rage. Look, I want to also say one thing to you. This stuff is kind of heady. So I'm doing my best to keep this like fun and visual, because when you get lost in thought, it's going to be hard to apply this. And so first of all, I want to commend you for sticking with this, because now we're going to dig into the exercise. I wanted you to have the understanding, because oftentimes I personally find that if somebody just throws a science-backed tip or exercise or tool or tactic or strategy at me, it sounds so dumb on the surface that without the underlying kind of research and mechanics and science that explains why this simple thing works, you will literally roll your eyes and not do it. So now that you have that background, I'm going to reward you with the exercise that I want you to practice. And this one is simple. So if you're cynical, if you're really smart, if you're analytical, it will sound stupid. But I want you to hang in there, because there is a really powerful thing going on in your neural pathways when you try this. And it's also an incredibly cool and fun thing to do with your family, with your friends. In fact, I get texts from people all over the world who are doing it, and my kids who do not live with us, our 2 adult daughters, they constantly text me pictures of what I'm about to ask you to do. So I promise you, it's worth trying. This is an exercise called looking for hearts. And this is how you play it. Every single day when you wake up, you are going to go on a scavenger hunt in your day-to-day life, and you are going to try to find a naturally occurring heart shape somewhere in the world. It could be a cloud that's shaped like a heart. You could look at your coffee and see that the foam on top has made the shape of a heart. You might get out of your car and you'll see a stain on the floor or a leaf that's the shape of a heart. I constantly see rocks. I see heart shapes in the top of mountain ranges. I see the shape of hearts in brick buildings all the time in terms of the different colors of bricks. And here's what's interesting about this. What you'll realize is that there are probably 10,000 heart shapes that are around you in your day-to-day life. The stain on the carpet, the spot on your dog's back, the tear in a pair of pants, the shape of a leaf. They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere. And right now, you walk right by them. Why? Well, because they're not important to you. You have not told the bouncer of your brain to let the hearts in to the nightclub. So you are walking right past all these things, and they are actively being blocked out. It is not in your conscious mind. The second you start playing this game, Find a Heart, you will experience something amazing. You will experience your brain going to work for you. And so here's how I want you to play this, because I do want you to play this every single day. This is truly not a game about finding hearts. This is about training your mind. This is a game where you are telling your mind, I am the freaking boss. Bouncer of the mind, I pay your salary. You are going to do what I tell you to do. You are going to find me a heart. And if you want to get paid, you are going to find me a heart. That is your job today. Find me a heart. So get intentional about that. And then I want you to go through your life and just let a heart shape in. And when you see it, here's what I want you to do. And if you're really analytical, you're going to think this is the cheesiest damn thing you've ever heard, but I want you to do this because there's neuroscience involved. When you see that heart, I want you to pause. And I want you to really stare at it for a minute. You can take a photo of it. If it's a rock, you can pick it up, or a leaf, and take it with you. Because I want you to reward your brain for being flexible and for trying to help you. I want you to take that moment for real, as cheesy as this sounds. The foam on the top of your coffee, the shadow on the floor. I want you to take a minute and really savor it and literally just go, holy shit, there it is. That's pretty cool. Yesterday, I walked right past this and I didn't even see it. Thank you, mind. Wow. You just changed in real time. You just let something in that I asked you to let that in. And if you really want to supersize this, if you're somebody that's really struggling with a sense of self-worth or hope or really believing that you can turn things around, I want you to look at that and tell yourself that that was placed there for you to find. That this was placed there because you needed to see evidence that it is in fact possible to change the way you think. It is in fact possible to tell your mind what you want to see more evidence of and for your mind to work for you. And once you see one heart, you will start seeing hearts everywhere. The more hearts that you see, the more that you are connecting into magic, the more that you realize that your brain is trying very hard to help you. It is going to point out hearts in the moss. It's going to point out hearts on the sidewalk. You're going to see hearts on people's clothing. You're going to see them in paintings. It's weird. They're like everywhere. It's as if there is this entire world that you and I live in, and we walk by it every single day. And I think that's true about everything that you want. That there is evidence all around you that things are working out, that people are trying to help you, if you're willing to see it. You know, at the end of the day, finding hearts is not about finding hearts. It is about something so much bigger, because it's proof that you can change the wiring in your mind. You can manipulate and program this filter, the RAS, to make it work for you. And every time you see a heart, it is evidence that it is true. And so it's important because this is the first step of a mindset reset. Because if you didn't think, my mind can change, it can allow me to see the world differently. If I can't get you to see and experience that, you will never even bother trying thought substitution. And I will say there is something that some of you may experience. So this comes from Nady in Germany. And she wrote, Mel, I loved what you said about looking for hearts, and I've been trying it. And I even saw 2 hearts within an hour. But then I got nervous and was almost afraid to find them. So how do you overcome the fear of making things better? I relate to this because we're used to the way that things are. We're used to the default programming in our minds, even if it makes us miserable. And when you start to catch a glimpse of how things could be different, I think sometimes if you've experienced a tremendous amount of heartache, or you've tried so many times to put yourself out there, the idea of believing again that it's worth trying again, that is what's scary. Here's what I have to say to you. This is not about hope. This is hard science. Because you're living with programming right now. And I am here to tell you it's outdated. In fact, when you start to really play around with this next piece of how you change the way that you think, you're going to realize that you're not even listening to your voice. You're listening to someone else's voice. It's probably your mom's or your dad's or another caregiver's. Because that negativity that's in your mind that chips away at you, that default programming that you don't even really hear, for me, I call it my campaign of misery. I did not create this when I was 6 or 7 or 8. I was taught this. And so you're going to start to realize that not only do you have the power to change the filter, yes, you can see reasons to be happy. Yes, you can spot wins instead of reasons why you're a loser. Yeah, you can pay more attention to the people in your life that make you feel great instead of chasing the ones that make you feel like crap. You can change all of this. You can make your mind work for you. But what you're going to realize very quickly is, holy cow, like there's this default thing in my mind that's like fighting my desire to be happy. It's fighting my desire to win. And so that's where we're going to go next, because there is an entirely different reality. One of the reasons why I always say to you is, I love you. I believe in you. I believe in your ability to create a better life. The reason why I say that to you all the freaking time, and I mean it, is because I know you don't say that to yourself. And I didn't say that to myself for a long time either. And I don't need to meet you to say, I love you. Because love is a verb. Love is how you show up in the world. This podcast is an act of love for me. It is a way to connect with you. It's a way for me to support you and empower you. And I show up here because I do believe in you. I don't care what's happened to you. You cannot convince me that you cannot change. I have way too much evidence on my side. You only have your experience. I've got an army of 1 million people that I've seen change. And so I know you can change because I know you can take the actions to make your mind a better place. You can take the actions to make your life feel better. You can take the actions to improve your relationship with yourself. And this is the most exciting part. This is the thing I am working on myself day in and day out. You can take the actions that reclaim your brain, that reprogram your mind, and that make your mindset and your thoughts work for you. I mean, all this shit is made up that we're saying anyway. So if you can think bad thoughts, why not think good ones? Does it actually make you happy to tell yourself that you suck and that there's something wrong with you? And is it even true? So if you can make that crap up, if you can adopt what somebody else says about you, can't you make up your own? Of course you can. And so let's get to that substitution diet. This is the Mel Robbins way to describe what researchers call cognitive bias modification. It's literally catching default thoughts and substituting something better. And one of the best examples of this is the next time that you start obsessing over what could go wrong. What if I don't like it? What if it doesn't work? What if I get rejected? What if what if I look stupid? What if they judge me? What if this? Say this. What if it works out? What if it works out? The more you say out loud, what if it works out? You substitute the negative bullshit with something positive. What if it works out? I mean, can you argue with me on that one? What if it works out? I didn't say it will work out. I said, what if it does? Because you don't know whether it's going to work out or not, do you? And when you allow your default wiring to filter the world with the belief and the thought that, what if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if this? What if that? Those thoughts filter the world a certain way. The thought, what if it doesn't work out, makes you not apply. It makes you not write that book. It makes you not go to the gym. It makes you sit home alone. Those thoughts are filtering your experience of life a particular way. And because the filter in your brain is paying attention to what you care about, it believes that's what you want. So as you scan the world around you, you see reasons why it's not going to work out. Didn't happen last time. It's a weird world after the pandemic. I don't want to embarrass myself. I feel uncomfortable. When you start to engage in thought substitution, what if it all works out? What if leaving my house is the best decision I've made in a decade? What if I meet the person that I was destined to meet? What if going to 90 meetings in 90 days at AA changes my life? What if it all works out? See how that mindset switch, cognitive bias modification, see how that leads you to feeling more encouraged? What if I make these 10 cold calls and nobody takes the call, but I'm okay? What if I walk up to this house that I think is going to go on the market and I knock on the door? And it turns out I buy it before it comes on the market. What if I get into my dream school? You're more likely to apply if you're like, well, what if it does work out? And this is why this is so important, because your brain is paying attention to what's important to you. And I don't think any of us have a clue how much airtime we give to negative thinking, to beating ourselves down, to assuming that life is going against you, to thinking something's wrong, to beating yourself up, to comparing yourself to other people. And when you start to pay attention to two facts, number one, your mind is trying to help you. And number two, when you figure out what's important to you and you make it a priority, your mind will adjust in real time and help you see an entirely new world. And when you see that it's possible that you could get into your dream school, that's a whole new world. When you see that it's possible that you'll make the best friends of your life in the next year of your life, a whole new world is possible. When you see that you can not only get your dream job, but you can land your dream job and it has a bonus, a whole new world is possible. And it begins with two simple things I want you to do. Look for hearts so you experience that a whole new world is possible, that there's a world that you're walking by every day. This is critical. I do this every single day. And, it sounds like such a dumb thing. And I often think about, this moment where a reporter's like, so what's your secret to success? And I'm like, look, I look for a heart every day. I mean, it sounds so stupid, doesn't it? But what I'm actually saying is I am actively engaged in the process of training my brain. Just like you would lift weights or resist weights or whatever it is that you do if you want biceps, you are training your body to be strong. I'm training my mind every single day to work for me. And every time I see a heart, it's a reminder, oh yeah, my brain will tell me what I want it to tell me. And so I can either let the campaign of misery take control of my RAS, Or I can tell my brain, no, it is important to be happy. It is important to feel like I'm winning. It's important to put myself out there in light. I need some help with this brain. And so the hearts for me is a simple way to explain this profound amount of research out there and put it into practical use. And this idea of a substitution diet for the shit you've been thinking forever that no longer serves you. That's a simple way for me to explain to you. You're not stuck with the thoughts that you think. That idea right there, that's the whole thing. That's everything. You are not stuck with the thoughts that you think. You can let them rise up, but you don't have to grab them and grip onto them and wrestle them to the ground. You'd be like, oh, there's that stupid thought that my dad taught me to think. Bye, Dad. I choose to think something else because I know what cognitive bias modification is. And that horse shit that you said that I was a failure or didn't mount up to something or wasn't wanted, I don't believe that shit anymore. Because it's important to me to not only see hearts, but it's important to me to encourage myself, to believe in myself, to believe in my life and my effort and my ability. Because that's what I believe. That's why I'm here. You can do this. If I can do this shit, you can do this stuff. You have no idea how screwed up I was. If you wanted to go toe to toe with somebody that had like the darkest thoughts in the world, Mel Robbins will go toe to toe with you any day. And you cannot get rid of it entirely, but thought by thought, you can learn how to not get hooked by it, and you can learn how to start to reprogram your mind. And I'm also going to tell you something. I said at the very beginning, it's not one and done. Like, this is not toxic positivity. I'm not here to sell you a pill to make your problems go away. I'm here to tell you that there will be times in your life where the negativity comes back and the default comes back and things get overwhelming. That happened to me just 6 months ago. When big things happen in your life, it can take you down for a little bit. But coming back to this stuff over and over, looking for hearts, there's the confirmation. I still, even though life sucks, my brain is still trying to help me. And really, I'm telling you, I call it hand-to-hand combat with your mind because that's what you're engaged in. Those negative thoughts either hook you and take you down, or you're like, boop, that's interesting. My grandmother's still bitching at me and she's dead. I don't really need this in my default program anymore. You know, that's what's available to you. So I mentioned earlier that this cognitive bias modification tools that we're talking about today work because not only have I used them in my own life, but also because we've had 250,000 students that I've taught a course about reframing your mindset, resetting your mindset to. And we do these extensive surveys afterwards. And one of the things that I know from our data is that the number one negative thought that people struggle with is, I'm not good enough. And I believe that everybody struggles with this. There are two reasons why. Number one, many of you grew up in a household where your lived experience was that you were told you weren't good enough, or you felt like you weren't good enough. And even if you grew up in a household where you didn't feel that way, you felt safe, you felt secure, you went to an elementary school or a middle school and you went through the period of human development called adolescence and teenage years, where you separate from your family and your number one objective developmentally is to bond with friends. And it's during that horrendous period of time that we call middle school that most of us start to size ourselves up in relation to other groups of people. Oh, they're the theater kids, I'm not good enough for them. Oh, the sports kids, I'm not good enough for them. Oh, the rich kids, I'm not good enough for them. It's a protection mechanism because you don't want to get hurt by approaching a group that you think is going to reject you. This is totally normal. We all have it. And ironically, what we do is we tell ourselves we're not good enough for certain groups or certain people. But our brains pay attention. And our brains at that little age and the filter in our brain starts to change and starts to scan the world for all the places you don't belong. That's my opinion about where it begins. It is part of everybody's development to go through this period where life is a sorting hat and you're trying to figure out where you fit in. And I wish that our brains did the opposite and basically scanned the world and were like, oh, well, let's just scan and see all the opportunities to fit in so that you amplify your strengths. But instead, we focus on our lack, and we do it as little kids. And because we've been doing it for so long, whether it began inside your home because of how you were treated, or in your community because of how you were treated, it definitely was an experience that you had when you were younger of trying to fit in. It happens to all of us. And the opportunity of your adult life and the rest of the time that you have is to reclaim your experience of life, to see all the places, not where you don't fit in, but all the places where you can go, all the places where you could be, all the wins that you have, all the strengths that you have, all the magic you have to give. That's the opportunity when it comes to changing your mindset and changing your brain. And when you take that on, because I believe that's true, I believe you fit in. I believe you belong. I believe you have incredible gifts to share with the world. I believe that you deserve happiness. I believe that you have huge wins every single day and that I want you to give yourself credit for them. I believe that you've survived a ton of crap and you don't even give yourself credit for that. I believe that you're pretty awesome. And I want you to start to have a brain that filters the world in that direction. And so that's why I'm telling you this. We all struggle with it to some extent. And in moments of weakness, it's going to be there again. But that's okay, because you can search for hearts and you can tell yourself, well, what if it all works out? You can remind yourself that we're all a work in progress. You can look for wins every day instead of the things that went wrong. You can spend more time with people that make you feel good instead of chasing places you really don't like. All of this is possible. And I want this for you, which is why I hope you'll try this. And simple reframes, if you don't feel good enough, is you can be like, I'm a work in progress. I can figure it out. The people who love me are the people who I need in my life. This is important. I really hope you take this on. And this is the work that you'll do for the rest of your life. And it's worth it, because the happiest days of our lives are the road ahead of us. Truly, I want that for both of us. And I've spent far too much time beating myself up and looking for what's wrong and searching for reasons to feel tortured or lonely and to stop myself. It's just horseshit. I'm so sick of it. And I'm sure you're sick of it too. And, I'm sharing all this because even though I teach this stuff, it's easy stuff to listen to or talk about. You got to put it into practice, and so do I. You got to catch yourself when the negativity starts. You got to cut off the voice in your head that is not your own. You got to knock this middle school shit off and start claiming your adult life, because you do deserve to be happy. And even if you don't love yourself, I'll tell you what, I love you. Even if you don't believe in yourself, that's okay. I believe in you. And I'm going to keep on saying it until you catch up with me, because I do believe that you can take the steps to reprogram your mind. You can take the steps to shut up that negativity in your head. You can take the steps to filter the world in an entirely new way and see how it's working to help you. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time to create a better life. Now go find a heart. I love you. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe, because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.